Peppa goes to hospital. Today, we are going to visit Pedro Pony in hospital, Madame Gazelle tells the class. Pedro's leg is broken and the doctors are mending it. Peppa has never been to the hospital before. Except when I was born, of course, Peppa says. I'm wearing my nurse's outfit, Susie Sheep says, because hospitals are very serious. But when the class arrives on the children's ward, the walls are full of colour. Ooh, they all say as they set off to find Pedro. Pedro is in bed with his leg in a plaster cast. Does it hurt? Zoe Zebra asks. It did at first, Pedro says, but not anymore. Do you want to draw on it? What's it like being in hospital? Asks Peppa. It's great, replies Pedro. Nurse gives me stickers and comes whenever I press this button. Another nurse comes over with a trolley. Lunchtime, she says. Spaghetti and sponge pudding, please, says Pedro. Wow, you get to eat in bed, gasps Peppa. Dr. Brown Bear visits Pedro. You're nearly better and ready to go home. The bell rings. Visiting time has ended. Get well soon, wave the children. A few days later, Pedro is back. Where is your plaster cast? Ask his friends. My leg is all better. It's a super leg now, Pedro says. Thank you for visiting me in hospital. The end. Peppa Pig, Peppa's super noisy sound book. It is a very rainy day. Peppa and George are in their house. We are going to have a quiet day inside, says Mummy Pig. Aww, sighs Peppa and George, disappointed. Peppa and George love going outside to play. Ho ho. Cheer up, you two, smiles Daddy Pig. You can help me mend the kitchen cupboard. Kitchen cupboards are boring, says Peppa. I don't like the rain, giggles George. Just then, the telephone rings. It's Mrs. Rabbit, Rebecca Rabbit's mummy. Can Rebecca and Richard come to play? She asks. Of course, says Mummy Pig. Yippee! Cheers Peppa. Rebecca and Richard Rabbit arrive. Richard has brought his brand new toy car. Vroom, vroom, squeaks Richard. And George has his toy, Mr. Dinosaur. Dinosaur! Growls George. Peppa and George get out their musical toys and make lots and lots of noise. Laughs Peppa, very proud of herself. Hooray! Cheer Richard and Rebecca. Now Susie Sheep has arrived and Mummy Pig has made lunch for everyone. Gobble gobble, delicious, everyone cries. Burp, burps Peppa. Excuse me. It's stopped raining, says Mummy Pig. Let's take the leftover bread and feed the ducks. Squeak, squeak, queers Rebecca Rabbit. Shall we give them carrots? Rebecca Rabbit likes carrots. I think the ducks would prefer bread, smiles Mummy Pig. Says George, jumping up and down. Peppa, George, says Mummy Pig, let Daddy put on your rain boots first. Yes, George, says Peppa. If you jump in muddy puddles, you must wear your boots. We're going to see the ducks. We're going to see the ducks, sings Peppa. George, Susie, Rebecca and Richard all join in very loudly. Ho ho, laughs Daddy Pig. What a lovely song, but you don't have to sing it quite so loudly. Hello, Mrs. Duck, cries Peppa, throwing some crumbs. I hope you're hungry. It's Richard Rabbit's first time feeding the ducks, and he's a bit scared. Don't be scared, Richard, says Peppa. They won't hurt you. Watch me. Peppa shows Richard how to feed the ducks. Wah, 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 shouts Richard. Dinosaur, shouts George. Silly George, laughs Peppa. You always say dinosaur for everything. Why don't you find some muddy puddles to jump in, says Mummy Pig. Yippee! Peppa shouts. Splish splash. Everyone is having a wonderful noisy time jumping and splashing. Here is Danny Dog and his mummy. Danny jumps in a great big puddle. Squelch! Oops, he splashed Daddy Pig's glasses. Oh dear, says Peppa. Now Daddy will be grumpy. I am not grumpy, snorts Daddy Pig. How about a nice quiet game of hide and seek, suggests Mummy Pig. Yippee, shouts Peppa. I'm brilliant at seeking. Everyone hides while Peppa covers her eyes and counts to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. George isn't very good at hiding. He stands by a tree with his eyes closed. Peppa thinks this is very funny and decides to surprise him. Very quietly, she creeps up behind him. Grunts Peppa loudly. Oh dear! George is very surprised and drops Mr. Dinosaur into a muddy puddle. George starts to cry. Peppa, have you been teasing George? Says Mummy Pig. Sorry, George, says Peppa. All the parents have come to collect the children. It is time to go home. Goodbye, everyone, cheers Peppa. Everybody waves goodbye. Ho ho, chuckles Daddy Pig. Peace at last. It's time for Peppa and George to go to bed. First, they brush their teeth. Scrub, scrub. Now let's have a nice, quiet bedtime story, says Mummy Pig. What shall we read? Asked Daddy Pig. Can we have one all about music? Peppa asks. I love music. Daddy Pig begins the bedtime story. It's about two very noisy piggies playing very noisy musical instruments. Peppa, George, and even Mr. Dinosaur join in all the actions. Roar, roar, growls George. Laughs Peppa. Peppa and George are a little bit sleepy. George starts to fall asleep first. That wasn't a very quiet day, giggles Peppa, yawning. No, it was a very noisy day, Peppa, replies Daddy Pig, smiling. But Peppa is already fast asleep. The Peppa Pig, Pirate Island.
I'm Peppa Pig. This is my little brother George, and this is the story of the day we went to Pirate Island.
Grandpa and Granny Pig took Peppa and her friends for a busy day out on Grandpa's boat. "All aboard," said Grandpa Pig. "Is everyone wearing their life jackets? Then off we go." "George, you can have my pirate hat," said Grandpa Pig. "Today we are sailing to Pirate Island, and if we are lucky, we might find buried treasure." Everyone was very excited. The boat landed on a sandy beach. Everyone climbed to the top of the island. Grandpa Pig planted a flag and said, "This is Pirate Island. Now let's look for buried treasure." Grandpa took a strange machine out of his bag. "What's that?" asked Susie Sheep. "It is a metal detector," said Grandpa Pig. "It finds buried treasure." He waved it over the ground and suddenly it started to beep. "Buried treasure!" cried Grandpa. "Let's dig it up." "Here's something," said Danny Dog. "It's a shiny coin. Maybe it's pirate treasure," said Grandpa. Everyone gathered round to look. Grandpa waved the metal detector over a new patch of sand and it beeped again. "This sounds very big," said Grandpa. Everyone dug and Grandpa pulled and pulled at the heavy object until suddenly it came free. "That's not buried treasure," said Grandpa Pig. "It's a rusty old shopping trolley." "Oh dear," laughed Granny Pig. "Maybe that's enough treasure hunting. Who wants to go to the rocky beach?" Everyone wanted to go to the rocky beach. "I'll go and check on the boat," said Grandpa Pig. Granny Pig and the children went off, leaving Grandpa Pig to do important boat things. It was a warm and sunny day on the boat deck. "Ah, this is nice," said Grandpa Pig. "Maybe I'll just close my eyes for a little bit." Granny Pig showed the children the rocky beach. "When the sea goes out, it leaves little pools of water in amongst the rocks, and every rock pool there's something special that the sea has left behind." Peppa looked in a pool. "Ooh, I can see something glittering. It's a shiny coin." "Maybe it's more pirate treasure," said Granny Pig. "And here's a seashell," said Peppa. "If you put a seashell to your ear, you can hear the sound of the sea," said Granny Pig. Peppa listened. "Wow, I can hear the sea." George had found something hiding at the bottom of the pool. "Why, it's a crab," said Granny Pig. "Ouch! The crab has pinched Granny Pig's finger," said Peppa. "Naughty Mr. Crab. Oh, look, Mr. Crab is walking sideways." George was walking sideways too, pretending to be a naughty pinching crab. "Let's all be crabs," said Peppa. Everyone played at being naughty pinching crabs. "Time to go home now," said Granny Pig. They all went back to the sandy beach. "Where's the boat gone?" said Granny Pig. "Look," said Peppa. There was the boat drifting out to sea, with Grandpa Pig fast asleep on the deck. "We have to wake Grandpa Pig up," said Granny Pig. "Shout as loudly as you can." Everybody shouted, but Grandpa Pig didn't wake up. "He's too far away to hear us," said Granny Pig. "We're stuck on Pirate Island forever," said Susie Sheep. "We're castaways. We'll have to eat insects and slugs," said Danny Dog. The boat floated across the sea, with Grandpa Pig sleeping peacefully. It drifted all the way back to the shore, where the parents were waiting to collect the children. "Hello, Grandpa Pig," said the parents. Grandpa Pig woke up with a start. Hello, everyone. I've just left something behind. I'll be back in a tick." And Grandpa Pig turned the boat round and set off for Pirate Island as fast as he could go. "There's Grandpa Pig," cried Peppa. "He's come to rescue us." "Welcome aboard, me hearties," said Grandpa Pig, and everyone got back on the boat. "Naughty Grandpa Pig," said Granny Pig. "We thought you'd left us behind." "Sorry about that," said Grandpa Pig. "Next time I promise not to fall asleep." "So we can visit Pirate Island again, Grandpa?" asked Peppa. "Of course we can, Peppa. I love Pirate Island," said Peppa. "What an exciting adventure we have all had today," laughed Granny Pig. "Goodbye until next time, me hearties." Peppa Pig. Beep beep. Broom. George's Noisy Vehicle Book. Peppa and her family are going for a picnic in the countryside. "Hooray!" cries Peppa. "I love picnics." George loves picnics too, but he wants to stay at home and play with his toys. "Cheer up, George, we'll have a lovely day," says Daddy Pig, beeping his horn. "Beep beep," giggles George. He likes a noisy red car. Off they drive down the hill. But what's that noise? It's Mr. Zebra's post van.
Wow!
"We're stuck in a traffic jam," says Mr. Zebra. "Oh dear," says Daddy Pig. "This isn't a good start." "Honk honk," laughs George. At last they're on the move. But what's that noise? It's Mr. Bull's digger. "Moo! You'll have to wait," bellows Mr. Bull. "We're digging up the road." "Not another delay," cries Mummy Pig. "Dig, dig, dig," laughs George. At last, Mr. Bull has finished and off they go.
Hooray!
But what's that noise? It's a fire engine.
Wow!
"You'll have to wait while I put out the fire," shouts Mrs. Sheep. "Nah," cries George, bouncing up and down on the back seat. At last the fire is put out, and off they go.
Hooray!
But what's that noise? It's a train. Daddy Pig has to stop while the train whizzes past. "Kiki!" laughs George. "Can we go home for our picnic?" asks Peppa. "What a good idea," says Mummy Pig. But George doesn't want to go home. He's loved seeing all the noisy vehicles. "Cheer up, George," says Peppa. "You'll be able to play with all your noisy toys." And he does. The end. Peppa Pig Bicycle Race. It is a lovely sunny day. Peppa and George are going out for a ride. Peppa rings her bell. Ding ding. "Come on, George," she says. "Follow me." Peppa is riding her bicycle. George is riding his tricycle.
Hurry up, George, calls Peppa. You're going so slowly,
says George. Peppa sees her friends Danny Dog, Susie Sheep and Rebecca Rabbit. They are riding their bicycles too. Danny points down the hill.
Let's have a race to the bottom,
he says. Danny, Susie and Rebecca ride very fast. Peppa rides quite fast. George does not ride very fast at all.
George is riding a baby bike,
snorts Peppa.
So are you,
says Danny.
You've still got stabilisers.
Peppa looks down at her bike. It is the only one with stabilisers on it.
Let's ride up the hill again,
says Danny.
No,
says Peppa.
I think I'll stay here.
Peppa asks Daddy Pig to take her stabilisers off. Do you think you can ride without them? He says.
I can do it,
Peppa nods.
I can.
She gets on her bicycle and starts pedalling. Uh-oh, Peppa falls onto the grass. Riding without stabilisers is hard. George giggles.
It is not funny.
Peppa frowns. Daddy Pig helps Peppa to get back on her bicycle. Let's try again, he says. Ready, steady, go!
Don't let go of me, Daddy,
says Peppa. Don't worry, says Daddy Pig. I've got you. Peppa pedals faster and faster. You're doing really well, shouts Daddy Pig. Peppa looks round. Daddy Pig has let go. Ho ho, he cries. You're cycling on your own. Peppa can ride on her own without stabilisers.
Wow!
She goes to find her friends.
Look at me,
shouts Peppa.
I can ride my bike properly.
Danny, Susie and Rebecca all cheer. Hooray!
Come on,
says Peppa.
Let's race down the hill again.
Danny, Susie and Rebecca ring their bells. Peppa loves riding her bicycle. Everyone loves riding bicycles. The end. Peppa Pig, Cold Winter Day. It is a cold winter day. Peppa and George have wrapped up warm in their hats, scarves and mittens to go and feed the ducks.
Look, it's a muddy puddle,
cries Peppa. Peppa loves jumping in muddy puddles. She runs over to the puddle, but as she tries to jump in, she slips.
Oh, it's frozen solid,
she says. Snorts George.
It's not funny, George,
says Peppa. Daddy Pig loves muddy puddles too.
Be careful, Daddy,
shouts Peppa. Daddy Pig has jumped straight onto the frozen puddle. Whoa, says Daddy Pig, wobbling about. It's lucky I'm so good at balancing. Everyone keeps walking until they find the duck pond.
Wow!
Peppa and George throw some bread to the ducks, but it just bounces along the surface. The pond is frozen too. Peppa and George both giggle as the ducks slide around.
Sorry for laughing, Mrs. Duck,
says Peppa.
But you do look funny.
Look, it's snowing, says Daddy Pig.
I'm going to catch lots of snowflakes,
shouts Peppa. Says George as he tries to catch them too.
Hello, Peppa and George, says Susie Sheep. We are going to have a toboggan race.
Wow.
Please, can we go and watch?
asks Peppa. Of course, says Mummy Pig. Let's walk up the hill to the start.
Hooray!
Daddy Pig picks up George because it is too slippery for him to walk up the hill on his own.
What about me?
says Peppa.
It's a bit slippery for me too.
Come on then, says Daddy Pig, scooping up Peppa. Mummy Pig tells Daddy Pig to be extra careful not to fall over. Don't worry, Mummy Pig, he says. I'm very good at balancing. At the top of the hill, all the toboggans are just setting off when Daddy Pig topples over and starts skidding down the hill. He zooms past Danny Dog, Zoe Zebra and Pedro Pony. Soon, Daddy Pig is in the lead. Peppa and George are sitting on Daddy Pig's tummy.
Whee!
They call. They are enjoying the ride. Peppa and George win the race.
Hooray!
My daddy makes a great toboggan,
Peppa tells everyone. All the children are laughing about Peppa and George's special toboggan ride. It's not funny, says Daddy Pig. It is a bit funny, says Mummy Pig. I suppose it is a bit funny. Daddy Pig agrees. Everyone laughs. The end. Peppa Pig, George's friend. Peppa and her friends are having lots of fun at the playground today. Peppa is on the roundabout with Susie Sheep and Danny Dog.
Hooray!
George is playing in the sandpit with Mummy Pig. Rebecca Rabbit and her little brother Richard Rabbit arrive. Richard has brought his toy dinosaur.
Hello everyone,
says Rebecca.
please can I play on the roundabout too?
Hop on, Rebecca, says Daddy Pig.
Let's go really, really fast,
says Rebecca. Richard wants to go on the roundabout with his big sister. Peppa sighs.
If Richard gets on it means we can't go fast. Richard, perhaps you'd like to play with George instead,
says Mummy Rabbit.
No,
Says Richard.
George has a dinosaur just like yours.
Says Mummy Rabbit.
Let's go and see.
Richard is the same age as George, and they both love dinosaurs.
Richard wanted to see George's dinosaur.
Says Mummy Rabbit.
Dinosaur!
Roars George. George and Richard both giggle. George, can Richard play with your dinosaur? Asks Mummy Pig.
No,
Says George.
Richard, can George play with your dinosaur?
Asks Mummy Rabbit.
No,
Says Richard. George and Richard do not want to share their dinosaurs. Mummy Rabbit gives both dinosaurs to George. George laughs and Richard starts to cry. Then Mummy Pig gives both dinosaurs to Richard. Richard laughs and George starts to cry.
George and Richard always cry when they play together,
Says Peppa.
Can you two big girls teach him how to play together?
Asks Mummy Rabbit. Peppa and Rebecca take George and Richard to the sand pit. The girls show their brothers how to make sand castles.
Wow!
George uses his spade
to squash Richard's sandcastle. Richard cries. Richard uses his spade to squash George's sandcastle. George cries. This game has not gone very well.
Oh no!
George, what's your favourite thing in the whole playground? Asks Mummy Pig.
Seesaw.
Shouts George. George sits on one end of the seesaw, but it needs someone on the other end. Richard wants to play on the seesaw too. Mummy Rabbit lifts Richard onto the seesaw. George and Richard go up and down on the seesaw.
George and Richard are playing together,
cheers Peppa. George likes Richard. Richard likes George. George and Richard like playing together. The end. Peppa Pig, Grandpa Pig to the rescue. Grandpa Pig is taking Peppa and George for a ride on his little train, Gertrude. Gertrude has rubber wheels so we don't have to go on train tracks, says Grandpa Pig.
Wow.
I love Gertrude, says Peppa. Miss Rabbit is in her big train, taking the grown-ups to work. Morning, Grandpa Pig, calls Miss Rabbit. Out on your toy train again. Gertrude is not a toy. She is a miniature locomotive, says Grandpa Pig. The big train is going very fast. It can go much faster than Gertrude. Oh no, the big train has broken down. Gertrude catches up with Miss Rabbit's big train. You need to get yourself a train that doesn't break down like Gertrude, says Grandpa Pig. That's a good idea, says Miss Rabbit. I'm borrowing your little train. All change, calls Mr. Rabbit. All the passengers climb into Gertrude and Grandpa Pig is left behind.
Oh no!
Mrs. Cow is waiting for the train at the next station. Has the train sunk? asks Mrs. Cow. No, this is a toy train, says Miss Rabbit. Gertrude is not a toy train. She is a miniature locomotive, says Peppa. There's a traffic jam on the road, so Miss Rabbit takes a shortcut.
Bonk, bonk.
Hello, ducks, calls Peppa as they ride past the duck pond. Gertrude might not be very fast, but at least she can ride on the grass. Gertrude crawls up the very steep hill.
Wow.
You can make it, cheer the passengers. Gertrude reaches the top of the hill very slowly. By the time she reaches the last station, it will be time for everyone to go home again. Back down the line, Grandpa Pig is trying to mend the big train. Grandpa Pig loves mending things. So many interesting bits and bobs, says Grandpa Pig, but can he put them back together again? Finally, Gertrude reaches the station, and so does Grandpa Pig with the big train. You've mended it, says Peppa. All change, calls Mr. Rabbit. Everyone gets in the big train ready to go home. Off we go, says Miss Rabbit. Stop, cries Peppa. What about Gertrude? We can't leave her behind. Don't worry, we can take the toy train as well, says Miss Rabbit. She uses a crane to hoist Gertrude into the big train.
Wow.
Gertrude is not a toy, says Grandpa Pig. We know, says Miss Rabbit. She is a miniature locomotive. Miss Rabbit drives all the passengers and Gertrude home. Everyone agrees that Gertrude is the best miniature locomotive in the whole world.
Gertrude is the best train in the whole world,
says Peppa. The end. Peppa Pig, Grandpa Pig's greenhouse. Peppa and George are at Granny and Grandpa Pig's house. They race across the garden to find Grandpa Pig. Hello, Grandpa, shouts Peppa. George has found a ball and is playing with it. Careful, George, my greenhouse is made out of glass, which breaks easily, says Grandpa Pig. Grandpa Pig throws the ball out of harm's way. The ball goes over the fence and lands in Grandad Dog's garden. Oi! Who's throwing footballs at my greenhouse? Grandad Dog calls over the fence. Grandpa Pig goes to speak to Grandad Dog. Call that a greenhouse? It's a pile of rotten old windows, says Grandpa Pig. It'll grow more than you do with your fancy grass box, replies Grandad Dog. Grandpa Pig decides to leave Grandad Dog to his gardening.
Could I have some tomatoes, please, Grandpa Pig?
asks Granny Pig. I'm afraid the tomatoes aren't ready yet, says Grandpa Pig.
Maybe Grandad Dog will lend us some of his,
suggests Granny Pig.
Grandad Dog,
calls Granny Pig.
Do you have any tomatoes we could borrow?
Borrow? You can take as many as you like, says Grandad Dog.
Hooray!
Everyone goes into Grandad Dog's greenhouse.
They're a lot bigger than your tomatoes, Grandpa,
says Peppa.
They may be bigger, but that doesn't mean they are better,
replies Grandpa Pig.
Yummy. This is the best tomato I have tasted ever,
says Peppa, tasting one. Says Grandpa Pig. Now Granny Pig has a basket full of delicious tomatoes.
We're going to make a tomato salad,
says Granny Pig. Grandad Dog tells her about his special tomato and basil salad recipe. The problem is I don't have any basil, says Grandad Dog.
My grandpa had lots of lovely basil,
says Peppa. Grandpa Pig shows them the basil he has grown in his greenhouse.
Wow!
Very impressive, says Grandad Dog. Peppa and George are feeling hungry now.
Is it lunchtime yet?
asks Peppa. It's time to make the salad. First we slice up the tomatoes, says Grandad Dog. Then we use a little splash of olive oil. Don't forget to add these lovely basil leaves, says Grandpa Pig. Time to tuck in, everyone, says Grandad Dog. Grandad Dog's tomatoes are marvellous and Grandpa Pig's basil leaves are beautiful.
This is the best tomato salad in the world ever,
cheers Peppa.
The end.
Peppa at the museum. Peppa and George are helping Grandpa Pig build a pond.
We'll start by digging a hole,
says Grandpa Pig.
Grandpa,
asks Peppa.
what's that in the mud?
She has spotted something buried in the ground. Peppa has found a little teacup. It looks very old.
Dinosaur,
Shouts George. He has found something too.
Yes, George,
Says Peppa.
that does look like a dinosaur bone.
Grandpa Pig keeps digging. He discovers a gold coin. More buried treasure. Granny Pig comes outside. She is carrying a garden gnome.
I bought it for the children,
She says. Grandpa Pig does not like gnomes.
Do you really think we have found buried treasure?
Asks Peppa. Grandpa Pig drives Peppa and George to the museum.
Let's find out,
He says. Mr. Rabbit works at the museum. He is in charge of caring for old things.
Hello, Mr. Rabbit,
Says Peppa.
we've dug up some treasure.
She holds up her teacup. Grandpa Pig gets out his coin. Fine china. Very interesting, says Mr. Rabbit. And a coin too.
Wow.
But George has found the best treasure of all. Mr. Rabbit takes everyone to the dinosaur room. You found a thigh bone, he cries. It fits my dinosaur perfectly. Hooray! Cheers Peppa.
Dinosaur,
Says George. Thank you for bringing these valuable objects into the museum, says Mr. Rabbit. Valuable, splutters Grandpa Pig. Are they worth something? Mr. Rabbit nods. Oh, yes, they are worth a lot of money. He puts Peppa's teacup and Grandpa Pig's coin in a glass case. Then he locks it up. Mr. Rabbit wants to know if there are any more treasure buried in Grandpa Pig's garden. Mr. Bull is an expert at digging, he says. Mr. Bull makes a very big hole, but he doesn't find much. Same as usual, he says. A load of broken pottery and smashed stuff. Never mind, says Grandpa Pig. You've dug my pond for me. Mr. Rabbit spots Granny Pig's gnome. Now that's a rare treasure. It is very valuable. The gnome should go to the museum, Grandpa Pig decides.
don't worry, Granny, chuckles Peppa. I'll visit with you any time you like.
The end. Peppa Pig and the Lucky Ducks.
Bonk, bonk.
Peppa and George have come to visit the ducks. They see one pond, but the ducks aren't home.
The ducks have gone on an adventure, George,
Says Peppa.
they're so lucky.
Says George. Peppa and George want to go on an adventure too. They want to find those lucky ducks.
Bonk.
Let's go,
Says Peppa. On the way, Peppa and George jump in two muddy puddles. They see 3 birds, but no lucky ducks.
Oh no!
George points. There are 4 worms. Peppa sees 5 sunflowers. And look, there are 6 ladybugs on the leaves.
Wow.
Granny Pig loves her garden gnomes. Peppa counts 7. Granny Pig hasn't seen any ducks today. Grandpa Pig's garden has 8 heads of lettuce and 9 carrots.
Look, George, says Peppa. There are 10 snails.
Says George. There are 11 bees. Cheep, cheep. And 12 baby chicks. What's that scurrying around the 13 potted plants? 14 ants.
Have you seen any lucky ducks?
Asked Peppa. Outside Granny Pig's chicken coop, 15 chickens are pecking in the soil. George wants to play frog. He jumps up and down. Peppa counts 16 frogs. George chases butterflies. He's not as fast as they are, and there are 17 of them. But he's faster than the 18 turtles resting in the shade. Mummy Pig loves flowers. There are 19 pretty ones here. Peppa turns around.
Bonk, bonk, bonk. Ducks! There you are, she says.
Peppa and George count 20 lucky ducks. Peppa and George have had an adventure. They are lucky too. The end. Peppa Pig, George's tractor. Peppa and George were spending the day at Granny and Grandpa Pig's house.
We're very glad you're here,
said Grandpa Pig. You can help us harvest the vegetables.
Hooray!
Hooray!
Cheered Peppa and George, jumping up and down.
Grandpa, what does harvest the vegetables mean?
Asked Peppa. Ho, 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 Grandpa Pig chuckled. When we harvest the vegetables, it means we pick them so we can eat them.
Ooh, said Peppa. Yummy!
Yummy!
said George, rubbing his tummy.
Let's go and harvest,
said Granny Pig.
It's a good job we've got our boots on. It's very muddy out here.
Peppa and George had lots of fun helping Granny and Grandpa Pig harvest their vegetables. Soon there were huge piles of vegetables all around them.
What a big harvest, Grandpa,
gasped Peppa.
Yes, it is, Peppa,
replied Grandpa Pig.
The biggest we've had in a long time. Isn't that right, Granny Pig? Granny Pig, where are you?
Peppa, George and Grandpa Pig looked around. They couldn't see Granny Pig anywhere. "Over here!" shouted Granny Pig, poking her head out from a tall pile of carrots. "Ah, there you are," said Grandpa Pig, smiling. "Granny," said Peppa, "you look a bit carroty." George giggled. "Hehehe, Daddy eek." "Next, we need to get all these vegetables into the crates over there," said Grandpa Pig, pointing to the other side of the garden. "All the vegetables, Grandpa?" asked Peppa. "Yes," replied Grandpa Pig, "every single one." Everyone looked at the enormous pile of vegetables. "Oh," said Peppa. Peppa, Granny Pig and Grandpa Pig began carrying the vegetables over to the crates.
Wow.
The crates were far away. Peppa looked around. "Where's George?"
Tractor!
cried George. He loaded up his toy tractor's trailer with lots of vegetables and moved them over to the crates.
That's very clever, George, said Granny Pig. Your tractor will make this much easier.
Everyone helped George load and unload his tractor.
That's everything, said Grandpa Pig. Thank you for your help, Farmer George and Farmer Peppa.
Tractor!
said George.
What are we going to do with all the vegetables now, Grandpa?
asked Peppa.
We can't eat them all, can we? No, Peppa. I don't think we can eat them all, replied Grandpa Pig. I know a special place we can take them, said Granny Pig. It's somewhere you and George will enjoy visiting.
Yippee! cried Peppa and George. Granny and Grandpa Pig took Peppa and George to a farmer's market.
Wow.
At a farmer's market, farmers and growers sell their fruits and vegetables, Granny Pig explained.
George was excited to see all the big tractors.
Tractor!
He shouted. George spotted an enormous tractor and pointed.
Big tractor! Wow, that's the biggest tractor I've ever seen, George, said Granny Pig.
While George and Granny Pig went to see the big tractor, Grandpa Pig and Peppa started setting up a stall for their vegetables. Suddenly they heard a loud rumbling noise. It was George on Mr. Badger's tractor, carrying all the crates of vegetables.
Wow, gasped Peppa. George is on a real tractor. Big tractor,
cried George as everybody unloaded the crates.
Thank you, Farmer George, said Grandpa Pig. Now our vegetable stall is ready.
Farmer Pepper and Farmer George had lots of fun selling the vegetables.
Rebecca,
cried Peppa, spotting Rebecca Rabbit.
Come and buy some of our vegetables.
Ooh, what a lot of lovely carrots, said Mummy Rabbit. How did you get them all here?
Big tractor,
said George. I see, said Mummy Rabbit. I would like to buy all your carrots, please. There were lots of customers at the farmer's market. Farmer Pepper, Farmer George, Granny and Grandpa Pig were very busy selling their vegetables. Hello, Farmer Peppa and Farmer George, said Daddy Pig.
Hello, Daddy, said Peppa. What would you like?
Said Daddy Pig, looking at the empty stall. Oh, said Peppa.
We don't have anything left.
Never mind, said Mummy Pig. It's time to go home now. What would you like for supper?
Carrots, please,
said Peppa. As you've sold all yours, we'll have to get some from the shop, said Mummy Pig. But how will we get there?
Tractor!
Cried George. George loved the farmer's market, but he loved tractors even more.
Tractor!
George loves tractors. Everyone loves tractors. The end. Peppa at the petting farm. Peppa, George and Rebecca Rabbit are going to visit a petting farm.
Mummy,
Says Peppa,
what can we do there?
you can feed and stroke tiny little animals, replies Mummy Pig. Ooh, gasps Rebecca.
I love tiny little animals.
Mrs. Badger is the farmer who looks after the tiny little animals.
Wow.
Before we see them, she says, there is one thing we have to do.
Wash our hands.
Say Peppa and Rebecca. That's right, says Mrs. Badger. The children go to see the chickens first. Would you like to feed them? asks Mrs. Badger. Peppa, George and Rebecca each take a bag of birdseed. Here, Chicky Chick, calls Peppa. Next, Mrs. Badger has a surprise for everyone. Now, she says, who wants to hold a baby chick? Me, 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 shout the children. Peppa giggles. The chicks are so fluffy and sweet. Soon it's time for the children to wash their hands again and go to see some other animals. These are guinea pigs, says Mrs. Badger. Ooh, cries Rebecca. Look at their cute faces.
And their fluffy little bodies,
says Peppa. Guinea pigs make excellent pets, says Mrs. Badger.
Can we have a pet guinea pig?
asks Peppa.
Please.
Daddy Pig frowns at Mummy Pig. Look at the time, he says. We have to be getting home. Mummy Rabbit comes to collect Rebecca. She has brought the baby twins, Rosie and Robbie.
Baby rabbits are so cute,
says Peppa.
Please, can we cuddle them?
Mummy Rabbit nods. There is just one thing to do first. Now Peppa and Rebecca's hands are clean. They can cuddle the twins.
Have you had a nice time today?
asks Mummy Rabbit.
Yes, laughs Peppa. We've had lots of cuddles.
Peppa loves a petting farm. Everyone loves a petting farm. The end.
Hi kids, did you have fun watching this video? Then like and subscribe for more.